The Galactic Council chamber stretched vast and endless, its vaulted ceiling alive with shifting constellations projected from unseen emitters. Delegates from dozens of species sat in curved rows, their forms silhouetted against the ethereal glow of holographic displays. Some were massive, others insectoid, reptilian, or amorphous, each one representing a civilization that had long since secured its place in the cosmos. At the heart of it all, beneath a golden crest of intertwined sigils, sat the ruling elite of the Zilari Dominion. Their leader, High Chancellor Varos Klin, lounged in his seat, 6 elongated fingers steepled in a display of boredom. His compound eyes reflected the dim lights of the hall, giving him an expression that was unreadable to human perception. Before him stood Ambassador Elias Carter of the United Terran Coalition. He was alone, flanked by 2 synthetic aides whose emotionless white faces gave no comfort. The humans had no military escorts, no grand displays of power, only words, carefully measured, painfully rehearsed. Carter's voice did not waver. "We petition for diplomatic recognition within the Council, as is our right under the statutes of emerging civilizations. The UTC has established peaceful colonies beyond Sol, opened trade routes, and made significant contributions to interstellar sciences. Humanity seeks to join the greater galactic community, not as subordinates, but as partners." Silence followed, the kind of silence that did not signal consideration, but condescension. Varos exhaled through his spherical vents, the Zilari equivalent of a sigh. "Your species is young." He leaned forward, his chitinous fingers clicking against the armrest of his seat. "You have barely crawled from your homeworld. Your fleets are laughable, your technology primitive, and your bodies—" He let out a dry, clicking sound that his species used for laughter. "So breakable." A ripple of amusement spread through the assembled council members. The Sindrith delegate, an eyeless being wrapped in coiling tendrils of iridescent skin, let out a melodic chime of agreement. The Vashtan, cold and logical, simply blinked their segmented eyes and said nothing. Carter clenched his jaw. "If you will not acknowledge our standing, then at least acknowledge our resilience. Our people have survived the worst of our own making and still endure. We do not ask for charity. We offer cooperation." Varos gestured lazily, dismissing the notion with an air of indifference. "You mistake endurance for strength. You are scattered, isolated, no allies of worth. The Council has no interest in your fleeting ambitions." The words landed like a blow, and Carter knew there was nothing more to be said. He gave a slow nod, his face betraying none of the frustration burning in his chest. "Very well." The Zilari Chancellor tilted his head, his multifaceted eyes glinting in amusement. "Do not take this personally, human. The galaxy is simply not kind to species like yours. You will learn this soon enough." Far from the council chambers, beyond the cold metal walls of diplomacy and debate, Zilari warships were already descending upon the human colony of Vestra Prime. The lesson was about to begin. The sky over Vestra Prime was the color of burning embers. What had once been a tranquil colony world, dotted with sprawling farmland and silver-blue oceans, was now a battlefield. From the upper atmosphere, the Zilari fleet loomed like specters, their warships hanging in formation with the precision of a predator circling wounded prey. The capital city of New Horizon lay beneath them, its defensive shields flickering as energy bombardments rained down. Governor Lena Vasquez stood at the command center, her hands gripping the edge of the holotable as real-time data streamed in from all over the planet. Reports were grim. Defensive batteries failing, civilian evacuation routes compromised, distress signals jammed by the enemy's superior technology. The Zilari had not come to negotiate. They had not even issued an ultimatum. The attack had been swift, precise, and devastating. "Governor." A panicked voice cut through the static-filled comms. It belonged to Commander Daniel Reeve, leader of the Planetary Defense Forces. His face flickered into view on the holotable, his brow streaked with sweat, his uniform marred with soot. "They've breached the eastern perimeter. We're barely holding them back." Lena's stomach twisted, but her voice remained steady. "How much time before they reach the core districts?" Reeve wiped his brow, his movements quick and desperate. An hour, maybe less. We need reinforcements. Reinforcements. The word felt like an empty plea. There were none. Vestra Prime was far from Earth, too distant for a rapid response fleet to arrive in time. The United Terran Coalition Navy was stretched thin, its ships already patrolling vulnerable sectors against pirates and rival factions. The Zalari had chosen their moment well. Lena turned to her communications officer, Lieutenant Harper, who was frantically adjusting the signal boosters, trying to punch through the enemy's jamming field. "Any response from Earth?" Lena demanded. Harper shook her head, her eyes clouded with frustration. "Nothing. The Zalari have locked us out of all long-range transmissions. I don't even know if our distress call got through." Lena exhaled sharply. Of course they had. The Zalari weren't just attacking Vestra Prime, they were making a statement. This was a show of force, a demonstration of humanity's helplessness, a warning to every colony and outpost that resistance was futile. Across the city, the sounds of battle echoed. Zalari drop pods slammed into the streets, their armored troops spilling out like locusts, moving with terrifying coordination. Their weapons were sleek and elegant, designed for maximum efficiency. Plasma bolts carved through buildings, reducing them to smoldering ruins. Human soldiers fought bravely, but their weapons were outmatched, their tactics inadequate against an enemy that had waged war for millennia. The streets ran red, the air thick with the scent of burning metal and ozone. And yet the defenders did not surrender. In the heart of New Horizon, a group of engineers worked desperately to restore a last-ditch communication relay, a pulse beacon, capable of sending a high-frequency distress call past the Zalari jammers. If they could activate it, perhaps someone, anyone, would hear their plea. But as the engineers worked, a shadow fell over them. A Zalari warlord, his golden armor reflecting the fires of the dying city, stepped forward. His secondary arms flexed, gripping a blade pulsing with raw energy. He had come to silence them. Lena Vasquez, watching from the command center, knew at that moment that this was not a battle. It was an execution, and humanity was alone. The last of the comms technicians slumped against the terminal, his hands shaking as he pressed the final sequence into the pulse beacon's control panel. Sparks rained from overhead as the power grid struggled to stay online. The relay dish, perched atop the New Horizon spire, hummed to life, its signal bursting through layers of jamming interference like a lone flare in the abyss of space. It was a desperate act, a dying world's final plea. Governor Lena Vasquez and Commander Daniel Reeve watched from the underground command bunker, their faces illuminated by the flickering holodisplay. The beacon's signal rippled outward, breaking past Vestra Prime's atmosphere, escaping the Zalari's interference net. But the question remained. Would anyone answer? Outside, the city was falling. The Zalari warriors moved through the streets with merciless efficiency, their segmented golden armor reflecting the firelight of burning buildings. They executed surrendering soldiers, dragging civilians from shelters, wiping out any trace of resistance. Their warlord, Heskren Vok, strode forward like a specter of death, his twin energy blades humming with malevolent power. At the top of the spire, the last remaining technicians fought to hold their position, knowing that if they fell, so too would any chance of rescue. The beacon pulsed, sending its distress call into the void of space, farther and farther, across the cold expanse of interstellar silence. For a long moment, nothing came back. Then something answered. A transmission burst into existence, shattering the stillness of deep space like a ripple on the surface of a forgotten sea. It was old, older than humanity's first step into the stars. The voice, deep and layered, carried a weight that sent a shiver through every technician in the bunker. "We hear you." Lena's breath caught in her throat. The signal had not been encoded in standard galactic communication protocols, yet the words were unmistakable. They resonated through the speakers as though carried by something far beyond technology, something ancient and long unseen. Commander Reeve turned to the communications officer. "Can you trace the origin?" Harper's fingers flew over the interface, her eyes widening as she processed the results. I don't know how, but the signal is coming from outside mapped space. It's It's from a system that was abandoned centuries ago. A heavy silence fell over the bunker. The name of the system appeared on the holomap, Yaros 5. It was a place that existed only in forgotten archives, a dead system where no ships dared venture, spoken of only in hushed whispers. It had been the final stand of a race long believed to be extinct, the Icaron. Long ago they had been one of the few species to challenge the Zalari dominion. Their war had been brutal, stretching across centuries, before their worlds fell silent. The Zalari claimed victory, yet no wreckage had ever been found, no corpses, no ruins, just the eerie, unbroken silence of abandoned battlefields. Now, after all this time, the Icaron had spoken again. The holodisplay flickered, and the grainy image of a figure emerged. Tall, clad in darkened, battle-worn armor. Its elongated features partly obscured by a hood of shifting nanofibers. Twin glowing eyes studied them, filled with something ancient and knowing. "You are not the first to call for help. You will not be the last," Lena swallowed. Who are you?" The figure tilted its head, as if contemplating the weight of the question. "We are what remains, and you are what comes next." A tremor ran through the bunker as an explosion rocked the city above. The Zalari were closing in on the last defenses, their warships sweeping over the capital like birds of prey. The Icaron's voice remained calm. "Hold fast, human. Help is coming." And then, for the first time in over 1,000 years, the silence of the void was broken by the arrival of something unseen, something waiting beyond the edges of history. A ripple formed in the fabric of space, above Vestra Prime. A ship emerged, sleek and dark, unlike anything the Zalari had faced before. Then another, and another. The forgotten warriors had returned. The sky above Vestra Prime was no longer silent. The Zalari fleet, poised in formation, like a wall of gleaming golden daggers, adjusted its position as something unexpected emerged from the void. Space itself seemed to twist as shadowed vessels, unlike any in recorded history, materialized beyond the exosphere. Their arrival was not announced with a show of power, no bombardments, no hails of destruction, just a ripple of darkness that sent a shiver through every sensor system on the battlefield. Inside the Zalari command vessel, Warlord Heskren Vox stood rigid, his secondary arms coiling at his sides in anticipation. His kind had ruled for generations, unchallenged, unshaken. Yet as he watched the readings on the holodisplay flicker with unreadable energy signatures, a feeling crept into his core, something foreign, something unwelcome. Doubt. The Icaron had returned far below, in the depths of New Horizons' underground command center. Governor Lena Vasquez and Commander Daniel Reeve watched in stunned silence. The holomap, once filled with bleak projections of impending collapse, now bloomed with new contacts. Dozens of them. Unknown vessels weaving through the stars like spectral phantoms. Lena turned to Lieutenant Harper, her voice barely above a whisper. "Tell me I'm not seeing ghosts." Harper's fingers danced over the interface, sweat glistening on her brow. Multiple ships. No known transponder codes. Heat signatures are all over the place, but their energy output is... She swallowed. "It's unreal. This tech, this isn't just old. This is something else." The transmission from Yaros 5 crackled back to life. The hooded figure, its twin glowing eyes unreadable, observed them from the flickering holoscreen. "You are afraid," the voice mused, more statement than question. Lena squared her shoulders, forcing her voice to steady. "I don't even know what I'm looking at." "What you are looking at, Governor Vasquez, is the reason the Zalari still fear the dark. We did not vanish. We became shadows. We learned. We endured." A pause. "And now, we rise." Above, the Zalari, warships realigned, adjusting their attack formations in a display of seamless discipline. They had spent centuries refining the art of conquest, dismantling civilizations before they could pose a threat. To them, strategy was an equation, a science of inevitability. And yet, as the Icaran vessels moved, their shapes shifting against the void, it became clear that this battle would not be fought by familiar rules. The first strike came like a whisper. A Zalari cruiser, ISS Valoran, registered an energy surge, a pulse of static, nothing more, before the ship's external plating. Peeled apart like unraveling silk. No impact, no explosion, just a silent, seamless dissolution, as if reality itself had chosen to erase it. Then, the second strike. One of the Icaron ships twisted in on itself, vanishing into a ripple of nothingness, only to reappear within. The Zalari battle lines, bypassing shields entirely. The ship unfolded like a blooming black flower, and in its wake, an entire war cruiser collapsed inward, crushed by forces unseen. A ripple of unease spread through the Zalari fleet. Their war protocols engaged, recalibrating firing solutions, but the Icaron were already inside their formations, moving with an elegance that defied conventional physics. Then the humans struck. From the surface of Vestra Prime, every surviving gun emplacement, every last mobile artillery platform, opened fire in unison. The moment of confusion in the Zalari ranks gave humanity seconds, and they used them well. On the ground, Commander Reeve led what remained of the planetary defense forces, his soldiers fighting tooth and nail through the wreckage of New Horizons' eastern district. The Zalari ground forces had pushed hard, but the shift in battle above had sent an unmistakable signal through their command network: uncertainty. That hesitation gave the defenders their first real opportunity. Using the smog of the burning city as cover, human strike teams launched precise counterattacks against the exposed Zalari positions. EMP charges detonated, severing the coordination of their exosuits. Tactical ambushes turned city streets into death traps. And then, the Icaron arrived on the battlefield. They did not descend in dropships. They stepped from the void, tall, lithe warriors clad in darkened nanoweave armor, moving as if reality itself folded to accommodate them. Their weapons did not fire bolts of plasma or streams of projectiles. Instead, they sang, each pulse of energy slicing through Zalari exoskeletons with terrifying efficiency. Reeve stood among his soldiers, watching in stunned awe as an Icaron fighter materialized amid a squad of Zalari troops. The warrior moved with fluid precision, twin blades humming as they carved through chitin and armor alike. No wasted movement, no hesitation, just ruthless perfection. One Zalari officer, desperate, swung his rifle toward the Icaron. In the blink of an eye, the warrior was already behind him, a clean strike. The enemy fell. Commander Reeve exhaled sharply. These were not just warriors. These were predators who had been waiting for this moment for centuries. In the command bunker, Lena watched the impossible battle unfold. Humanity, pushed to the edge of extinction, was no longer fighting alone. She turned back to the flickering hollow image of the Icaron leader. "You came," she said, her voice caught between relief and disbelief. The hooded figure tilted its head, slightly. "You are not the first to stand against the Dominion, but you may be the first to survive it." Lena inhaled, her hands tightening into fists. This wasn't over. Not yet. For the first time since the war began, the Zalari were on the defensive, and humanity was just getting started. The skies over Vestra Prime were no longer owned by the Zalari. For the first time since the war began, they hesitated, on board. The Zalari command vessel, Warlord Heskren Vox, stared at the unfolding chaos, his golden eyes narrowing. His fleet, his invincible fleet, was being undone. Not through brute force, not through superior firepower, but by something infinitely worse: uncertainty. The Icaron ships moved like phantoms, slipping through Zalari fire patterns, emerging from folds in space where no ships should have been. They struck with surgical precision, unraveling key battle cruisers, breaching command nodes, severing the vast neural war net that bound Zalari forces into their usual unstoppable unity. Heskren Vox's secondary hands tightened around the hilt of his ceremonial blade, its edge glowing with barely restrained plasma energy. This wasn't possible. The Icaron were extinct. His mandibles clicked together in frustration. Or so they had been led to believe. Supreme Warlord, a Zalari strategist officer, turned from his console, his normally confident voice laced with uncertainty. "Our battle net is fragmenting. The humans are pressing their advantage. The Icaron—" "I can see that, Kalash," Heskren barked, his tone a razor's edge. He took a step closer to the holomap, glaring at the flickering projections. It was unraveling before his very eyes. Humanity, the species they had deemed weak, primitive, insignificant, was still standing. No. They were doing more than standing. They were fighting back. And the Icaran, they were winning. On the surface, Commander Daniel Reeve pressed his back against a crumbling ferrocrete wall, his rifle humming as he reloaded. His unit had pushed the Zalari out of the eastern quarter, reclaiming street by street, building by building. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were advancing. Overhead, the sky flickered with the distorted shapes of Icaran warriors, materializing from the void and tearing through Zalari war forms with an almost eerie efficiency. A squad of them moved past him, their forms barely solid, like silhouettes against the burning skyline. One of them, taller than the others, clad in a shifting black nanoweave cloak, paused. Their face remained obscured beneath a smooth, dark mask, twin silver eyes peering through the haze. Reeve met that gaze and despite himself felt a deep primal instinct telling him that this being, this warrior, had fought battles before humanity had discovered fire. "You fight well, human," the Icaran said, their voice an echoing whisper, both distant and near. "We expected you to break. But you—" They tilted their heads slightly. "You refuse." Reeve exhaled, adjusting his grip on his rifle. "Yeah, well," he muttered, glancing at the burning wreckage of a Zalari walker that had been reduced to molten slag. "We've got a habit of being stubborn." A pause. Then the Icaran nodded. "Good." Without another word, the Icaran warrior stepped forward and vanished, dissolving into a pulse of distorted reality, already rejoining the battle. Reeve let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. What the hell had humanity just allied with? Across the battlefield, the Zalari reeled. They had expected domination, swift annihilation. But the reality before them was something far worse, a battle they were beginning to lose. Aboard the command vessel, Heskran Vok felt it. The tide was shifting. If they didn't regain control, Vestra Prime would become a symbol, a beacon to every other species that had suffered under the Zalari dominion. They could not allow that. He turned to his bridge officers, his voice a snarl of command. "Deploy the Oblivion Lance." A ripple of hesitation ran through the command deck. Even among the Zalari, such a weapon was rarely used. "My warlord." One of the technicians hesitated. "If we fire the lance at this range, we will crush them," Heskran roared, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Do it now." The technician swallowed and turned back to the control panel. A warning klaxon blared across the Zalari fleet. Deep in the bowels of the Dominion-class dreadnought, containment fields unraveled, revealing a weapon forged in the dying embers of fallen civilizations. A lance of searing antimatter energy began to charge, enough to burn half a planet to ash, in an instant. In the underground command bunker, Governor Lena Vasquez saw it first. The moment the energy spike registered, her heart nearly stopped. "Commander Reeve," she called through the comms, her voice sharp with urgency. "They're about to glass the entire city." Reeve, still on the battlefield, spun to the sky, eyes widening as he saw the crackling distortion of the Oblivion Lance taking shape. "Oh, hell," he muttered. They had seconds, maybe less. Then the Icaran moved. High above, in the cold void of space, the largest of the Icaran ships, a vessel so black that it swallowed the light around it, shifted. The hooded Icaran leader, still watching through the holoprojector, turned its unreadable gaze toward Lena. "We anticipated their desperation." Lena's pulse pounded in her ears. "You knew they'd do this?" The Icaran gave the barest nod. "The Zalari believe in overwhelming force, they always have." Above them, the Oblivion Lance fired. A beam of pure annihilation lanced downward, an unholy spear of energy streaking toward Vestra Prime's surface. But just before it could impact, the Icaran ship moved. It didn't evade. It didn't shield itself. It simply consumed the blast. The beam struck the vessel and vanished. A ripple of unnatural black energy spread outward, devouring the attack before it could reach the surface. The void itself seemed to drink the power, twisting and folding, leaving only silence in its wake. On the Zalari command deck, Heskran Vok stared in stunned disbelief. "Impossible," he whispered. The Icaron leader turned back toward Lena through the holo projector. "Now," they said softly. "Watch as we show the Zolari what true fear is." In a single fluid motion, every Icaron warship activated their full power. Space shattered. The Zolari fleet, once the unstoppable enforcers of Dominion, were about to learn what it meant to be hunted. The Zolari fleet, once an impenetrable wall of golden warships, now twisted in disarray. The moment the Oblivion Lance had vanished, consumed by the Icaron flagship without a trace, every Zolari commander felt it. A raw, unfamiliar sensation that crawled into their very being. Fear. For centuries, they had been the architects of domination. Their fleets had burned civilizations to the ground. Their soldiers had broken the wills of entire species. They had ruled through the knowledge that no force could stand against them. Now, in the cold void of space, the unthinkable unfolded. The Icaron vessels, once drifting shadows on the battlefield, became something else entirely. They no longer moved like ships, bound by engines and thrust. Instead, they flowed, shifting in ways that defied all conventional physics. One moment, they were distant figures on the edge of the battlefield. The next, they were inside the Zolari formations, tearing into the enemy like phantoms of war. Zolari warships that had once reduced planets to ruin were pulled apart like paper. Shielding. Systems failed without cause. Engines collapsed into singularities of their own making. Weapons refused to fire, their targeting systems rendered blind. Warlord Heskren Vok gripped the edges of his command console, his forearms coiled in frustration as the hollow tactical display descended into madness. "Explain," he snarled, his golden eyes flashing as his strategists fumbled over their controls. "What is happening to our warnet?" A technician's mandibles trembled. "My warlord," he said, voice hollow. "They are rewriting it." Heskren stiffened. "What?" "They are inside our systems, our network, our communications, our very ships. They are—" The officer swallowed. "They are evolving around us." Heskren's secondary arms clenched into fists. Impossible. No force had ever dared penetrate the Zolari neural warnet. It was the foundation of their military supremacy. An interlinked system that allowed Zolari commanders to process battles in perfect unity. It had never been breached, yet now, before his very eyes, it was coming undone. "Shut it down!" he roared. "Sever all neural links!" But it was too late. Across the battlefield, Zolari warriors collapsed, their exosuits locking up as their neural interfaces became a prison. Warships, unable to receive coordinated orders, drifted blindly into the line of fire. Entire battlecruisers turned against one another, targeting their own allies. The Icaron weren't just fighting the Zolari. They were hollowing them out from the inside. On the surface, Commander Reeve and his strike teams pushed forward through the rubble of New Horizons' outer districts. The Zolari ground forces, once an unstoppable march of conquest, were in utter disarray. "What the hell is happening to them?" one of his lieutenants, Sergeant Doyle, muttered as they watched a squad of Zolari stagger and collapse. Their once deadly battle armor jerked and twitched, systems malfunctioning in ways that made no sense. Some tried to rise, only to freeze mid-motion, their weapons locking as if unseen hands held them in place. Reeve tapped his helmet interface, his gaze shifting toward the skyline. The battle had already been decided. In the underground bunker, Governor Lena Vasquez stood before the hollow projection, her face unreadable as the Icaran leader observed her with quiet patience. "You've won," she said at last, her voice barely above a whisper. The twin silver eyes within the Icaran's dark mask did not blink. "We have corrected the balance." Lena exhaled sharply. This wasn't just a victory. This was the complete unmaking of the Zolari war machine. "What happens now?" she asked, voice tense. The Icaran warrior tilted their head ever so slightly. "That depends on you." Lena narrowed her eyes. "Meaning?" "You now stand upon the edge of something greater than war. The Zolari have shaped the fate of this galaxy for eons, but today—" The Icaran's voice lowered, almost reverent. "That changes." The projection flickered as the Icaran warships above unleashed their final attack. The Zolari command vessel, once the crown jewel of their armada, shuddered as its own. Systems betrayed it. Warlord Heskren Vok let out a guttural snarl, his upper arms gripping his plasma blade as he turned toward his remaining officers. "This is not the end," he roared. "We are Zilari. We do not—" The ship shook violently. The holodisplays failed. The lighting flickered, bathing the command deck in an ominous red glow. Then, the voice came. Not through the speakers, not through any conventional transmission, but through the very neural warnet itself. "You built your empire on fear." The words slithered into their very minds, alien yet ancient. "Now you will learn its true meaning." And then, in a single terrifying instant, the Zilari warnet collapsed, the ship's core overloaded. The last thing Heskren Vok saw was the silent arrival of the Icaron flagship as it hovered before them, watching, waiting. Then, darkness. The Zilari command vessel imploded, a black void swallowing it whole before collapsing into silence. The greatest warlord of the Dominion was gone, and with him, the Zilari Dominion shattered. Far below, Lena Vasquez exhaled as she saw the final marker of Zilari leadership disappear from the battle map. It was over. The Zilari, who had ruled through fear, had finally been defeated. She turned back to the Icaron leader, her voice steady. "You didn't just win a battle." The silver-eyed figure remained motionless, but she could feel the weight of their gaze. "You ended an empire." A long, measured silence. Then, the Icaron leader gave a small nod. "And now, Governor Vasquez, a question remains." The air in the bunker grew heavy. What will humanity do with the ashes? Lena's breath caught in her throat. Because she knew. This was just the beginning. The silence in the bunker was deafening. "Governor." Lena Vasquez stood motionless, staring at the Icaron leader. The holographic projection flickered slightly, its edges shimmering with the telltale signs of a technology far beyond human understanding. The Icaron's silver eyes remained fixed. On her, their gaze patient, unwavering. What will humanity do with the ashes? The question echoed in Lena's mind, intertwining with the weight of history pressing down upon her. The war was over. The Zilari Dominion had fallen. But wars weren't just about battles. They were about what came after. She knew this moment, this choice, would define everything that followed. She took a breath. "What do you expect us to do?" The Icaron warrior tilted their heads slightly, the faintest trace of movement in their cloak-like armor. "We do not expect, we observe. We have seen empires rise and fall. Some seek vengeance, others seek dominion. And then, there are those who seek something else." Lena narrowed her eyes. Something else? A future beyond war. The words settled in the air between them like a challenge. Lena exhaled slowly, running a hand through her short, dust-covered hair. "Humanity doesn't forget, and we sure as hell don't forgive easily," she admitted. "The Zilari burned our colonies, enslaved our people. If you think we're just going to—" "No," the Icaron interrupted. "You are not Zilari. That is why we chose to stand with you." Lena clenched her jaw. The weight of responsibility loomed before her. 1,000 voices whispered in the back of her mind. The screams of the dead, the cries of the displaced. Revenge would be easy. The Zilari had ruled through fire and terror for generations. It would be simple to turn their own cruelty against them, to burn their worlds as they had burned humanity's. But humanity had always been something more. And now, the entire galaxy was watching. She turned, her voice steady. "Then we build," she said. "We don't replace the Dominion with another empire of conquest. We make something new." A flicker of something, approval, amusement, passed through the Icaron leader's stance. "Then the true work begins," they said. And in that moment, everything changed. The weeks that followed reshaped the galaxy. Across the stars, the Zilari's iron grip fractured into dust. Entire systems that had once trembled under their rule rose up, declaring their independence. Some worlds celebrated their newfound freedom. Others descended into chaos, struggling to define what life meant without oppression. But in the heart of it all, humanity moved forward. On Vestra Prime, once a battlefield, now a symbol of something far greater, a new council was formed, not a government of conquerors, but a coalition of the once oppressed. The United Accord was born. Led by humanity and its newfound allies, the Accord sought to fill the void left by the Zalari, not with chains and warships, but with something entirely foreign to a galaxy so long ruled by fear, stability, cooperation, strength through unity, not subjugation. The Icaron remained, watching, guiding in their own enigmatic way, yet never seizing control. They had no desire to rule. They had seen enough empires fall to know that true power was never in dominion, but in influence. Some Zalari warlords, refusing to accept defeat, retreated to the outer fringes, vowing revenge. They would become a shadow of what they once were, remnants of a lost age, whispering threats from the void. But they no longer dictated the fate of the stars. Humanity had changed everything. As the first light of a new era dawned, Lena Vasquez stood atop the ruins of a Zalari stronghold, looking over the rebuilding city of New Horizon. Beside her, Commander Daniel Reeve crossed his arms, gazing up at the sky, where ships, human, Icaron, and dozens of liberated species, moved, together, not as conquerors, but as something greater. "You think we're ready for this?" he asked, his tone laced with cautious optimism. Lena let out a breath, the weight of everything settling into her bones. "We weren't ready for the war, but we fought it anyway," she said. "And we weren't ready to lose everything, but we survived that too." She turned to him, eyes filled with something stronger than hope, conviction. "We'll make this work. Because if we don't, then we're no better than the ones we defeated." Reeves smirked. "Sounds like a lot of responsibility." Lena shrugged. "Yeah, but humans have a habit of carrying the impossible." They stood there for a moment, watching the sun rise over the ruins, over the ships, over the future they had carved from the ashes of war. And for the first time in generations, the galaxy was theirs to shape. The weak had become strong. The hunted had become the saviors, and humanity, against all odds, had changed the course of history forever.